We are now halfway through Mandalorian Season 3 with the release of Episode 4, The Foundling. This episode follows in its predecessor's footsteps by delivering so many Star Wars Easter eggs, hidden details, and subtle references that will make any nerd go crazy. After finally seeing the comeback of the Jedi on Coruscant in Episode 3, Chapter 20, The Foundling, returns us back to the Mandalorian covert. This once again brings the focus back onto Pedro Pascal and Katie Sackhoff's characters, as well as the Foundling Grogu. The last episode might have been pretty good for many fans, but we felt it was a little too long and didn't focus on enough content that we cared about. I know it's setting up the wider Mandalorian storyline and fleshing out the Star Wars universe at this point, but we watch this show for the Mandalorian Baby Yoda. Yeah, it's nice every so often to have side characters pop up, and we really appreciate it, but the last episode seemed quite pointless. It was obviously setting up the cloning storyline that we would later see in Star Wars Episode 9 with the return of the Emperor, but we honestly don't really care. This is a Mandalorian show, and Episode 4 returns back to that route. Due to the show finally returning to the Mandalorian covert, we get to see a plethora of Mandalorian-related Easter eggs. We also finally see further details on what Grogu was doing during Order 66 and how he made his first steps into the galaxy. Speaking of first steps, Grogu also made waves in trying to become a Mandalorian, even battling against one. It was such a good episode, but there's so much to discuss in terms of its secrets and hidden details. So stay tuned for today's video as we discuss the many hidden details in The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 4. It's going to be a crazy one, so stay tuned. There are so many small Mandalorian Easter eggs throughout this episode, but the most important is what went on with Grogu. We do get to see the iconic Mandalorian restarts that we're used to by characters such as Boba Fett and Jango Fett. We also see Boba Fett's iconic EE-3 carbine blaster, which was used in the original Star Wars trilogy. There's also the Mandalorian vibroblade, which was used by the Children of the Watch. There are so many small Easter eggs during one scene where we see a myriad of Mandalorians training on a beach. It's actually really hard to go in-depth and look because there's not much going on. But that isn't the most important part of this episode. In fact, most of the important parts come from Grogu and his flashback later on in the episode. Though the episode itself is titled The Foundling, it isn't just based on one character. Many assumed it would be solely based on Grogu, but instead it's based around Ragnar and his kidnapping. Though it's a highly important part of the episode, Grogu's backstory and what went on during Order 66 take the forefront. It's the most awesome part for Star Wars fans, and that's what we're going to mainly discuss further in today's video. We begin this part of the episode by seeing Grogu and the Armorer sitting around the forge. The Armorer is making Grogu another piece of armor to build towards his later Mandalorian full set. While Grogu is waiting for his armor to be made, the consistent slams of the forge make him think back to the horrific events of Order 66. This reflects on Season 1 of The Mandalorian, where we saw our Mandalorian's backstory while having his armor forged. It's a cool moment and shows the connection that these two characters have with one another. But the best thing is coming next, as we finally get a full flashback to the iconic events of Order 66. One huge Easter egg during this moment is to the prequel era, as in Grogu's Order 66 flashback. We get to see a different perspective of what happened with Anakin Skywalker. Though we don't see the iconic Sith Lord, Anakin Skywalker was definitely going on the rampage during this moment. We see an extended version of the flashback from the Book of Boba Fett, where Grogu is reliving being saved by the Jedi. They end up placing the youngling into an elevator, and we are wondering who's going to be on the other side. Throughout the scene, there are some awesome callbacks to the prequel films, as the set pieces are exactly the same as back then. The Jedi Temple looks almost perfect from the prequel trilogy, and it's such an awesome Easter egg. One amazing moment for Star Wars fans, but it got even better with who was on the other side of the elevator. As Grogu comes down in the elevator, the camera pans up, and the fan base is ready for an iconic Jedi reveal. Who is it going to be? Samuel L. Jackson returns as a one-armed Mace Windu. Or maybe even Obi-Wan Kenobi for some reason? It could have been anyone, but we are 1,000,000% sure that no one expected this. This is arguably one of the most heartwarming Easter eggs in The Mandalorian, as this is the delightful appearance of Ahmed Best. He is once again playing Kelleran Beck, a Jedi Master whom he played in a spin-off series of Star Wars. He began playing the character in Star Wars Jedi Challenge, a children's game show that emulated Jedi training for its contestants. Though it was meant to be an offshoot, the character was canonical to the Star Wars universe, allowing him to appear in The Mandalorian. Though this might just seem like a small Easter egg to many Star Wars fans, when you realize who the actor is, it gets even better. Ahmed Best played Jar Jar Binks in George Lucas's prequel trilogy of films. The character was obviously hated at the time for some reason, which affected Best behind the scenes. He said in various interviews and even in a documentary that he almost took his life due to the hatred he got for playing Jar Jar. This makes this moment even better for diehard Star Wars fans, as he finally gets to redeem himself on the screen. He goes to such lengths to save Grogu, taking him on a jet bike all the way to a royal ship to get away. Thankfully, he does this safely, but we don't know what's going to happen next. There is a good amount of time between this moment and when we meet Grogu in the original Mandalorian episode, so a lot of things could happen. We are assuming that the Jedi is going to be killed, but what's going to happen to Grogu at that time? He obviously wasn't training, so maybe he was put into cryostasis or something. It's a weird one, but we're super excited to explore it later down the line. Speaking of being excited, there is another Clone Wars reference in the Order 66 scene. The Jedi are of course stormed by many clone troopers in the Jedi Temple. But if you listen closely, you can hear Tamara Morrison's voice return as them. It's such an awesome moment because he is an iconic voice actor for those characters and deserves to be in the series once again. We obviously saw him back as Boba Fett recently, but the fact that Lucasfilm is still pushing him as one of the clone troopers is awesome to see. It really was the cherry on top of the episode and made the entire thing even better. Wasn't that episode downright amazing? Though it was on the short side at 30 minutes, it might have been one of the best episodes of The Mandalorian yet. We can't wait to see where the story takes us, and we are definitely going to tune in next week. But that's the end of today's video. Thank you for watching.